Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Team ELT Summit 2020, I welcome you all to the pre-conference workshop on the challenges of creating teacher presence in the remote classroom. What makes a good online teacher? Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, the teacher community all over the world is facing a very unique challenge. No. It's not a sari challenge, motherhood challenge, or lockdown challenge. It is the challenge of digital transformation overnight. And yes, the brave teacher community smiled and said, challenge accepted. With regards to the same, today, Team ELT Summit has invited a very charismatic personality among us, Mr. Nik Peachey. Welcome, sir. A person who has molded every challenge into an opportunity in the field of education technology. Having mastered in education technology, Mr. Peachey has been involved in major training consultancies of ELT schools, organizations, and companies around the world, which includes British Council, BBC, Open University, Google, International House, and many more. Currently, he is the head of learning for leadership English Up, an online language school. It is indeed our pleasure, sir, to witness an opportunity to listen an award-winning course designer and the successful author of many books. To introduce him, I would run out of the words. So without waiting much, I'll hand over to you, sir, now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for coming along. It'd be nice if you could just type into the chat where you're joining us from, so I'd get some idea of where you're located and things like that. Could be city or country, either one, just to make sure you know where the chat is as well. A quick, okay, so Bangladesh, yeah, great, good. Great. Good to see quite a wide range of countries and cities around the world there. That's fantastic. Okay, I'm actually based in London, well, just outside London in the UK, in Kent, in a little town called Rochester. So for me, it's just coming up to lunchtime. Okay, I'll make a start on this. This session is about the challenges of creating teacher presence in a remote classroom. Just a little quick bit about myself. I actually have a number of roles that I'm involved in. I'm director, my first role is director of Peachey Publications. I'm the pedagogical director. We're a small independent publishing company that publishes digital materials for this kind of environment. I also work as an online course designer, and I've worked for a number of different companies, including sort of Bell Educational Services, who I won the 2012 Innovations Award for. I've worked for King's College Online, Eton, and English Up, and most of the big publishers in the UK. I'm also an author, and I do write my own books. And my first book that I wrote was Digital Video, a manual for language teachers, and that won the 2016 Innovations Award. My fourth role, I'm kind of busy, is as a learning technology consultant and trainer, and that involves doing the kinds of things that I do now and going around to various countries, training teachers to use technology. I've been involved with technologies for well over 20 years now, and taught my first online course back in 1998. And at that time, teaching online was kind of, students would go online, download digital materials, work through them on their own, and then, on their computer at home, and then I would ring them up, and they would have a kind of telephone conversation with me, and that was sort of part of their course. And as we see now with things like Zoom, things have moved on tremendously since then, which is marvelous. The presentation that I'm using at the moment will be available to you. I'll share a link with you to it at the end of the session. So don't worry too much about trying to keep up with the different ideas or making notes of them. All of the information will be in the presentation, and you can just download a link to that and work through it whenever you want to sort of pick up your notes if you want to. Within the presentation, there are links to my social media presence along here. So if you want to check out any of those things later, please do. And I'll just move on to the next slide. So in this session, the things that I hope to be looking at, I'll look at a bit of background to the session and the information that I'll be sharing with you. Some things about training and sort of what I've learned about training teachers to work in this kind of environment. And then sort of looking at elements of rapport, which I think are very important, and how we create those elements through using the environment that we work in, how we work with the webcam, and how we build teams among our students. I'll also be looking a bit at how we can develop socialization in this kind of environment, and how we can sort of empathize with the kind of problems that our students are having at the moment. And at the end, there'll be time for questions, which I'll be happy to try and answer if I can. No promises with that. Okay, so firstly, the background to the talk that I'll be doing is basically I've been involved in education for 30 years now, initially starting as a classroom teacher. Actually, before I started teaching English, I used to teach the guitar, and while I was a student, and I taught the guitar in a prison to prisoners, and that is how I got interested in education and became an English teacher because of that. I've been working in the digital field for about 22 years now. I started a master's in education in educational technology in ELT back in 1999, the last century, which makes me seem very old now. And I've been working as a kind of freelance, doing various jobs with various people since about 2007. I was a university lecturer at Westminster on their MA-TESOL, and I worked as head of learning at a company called English Up. Between 2014 to 2016, and that was 100% online school where we had teachers all over the world who were teaching students in Brazil. And a lot of the insights I'll be sharing here are from the sort of time that I did that. I was also involved with Eton College setting up their Eton X platform, which is an online platform for delivering soft skills lessons to students around the world. So those are some of the sort of sources of the learning that I've sort of gathered over the years and which I'll be trying to share with you. The first slide here that I'll show you is teacher training for remote teaching. And I think, as while I was working with the various different companies that I've worked with and helping teachers to learn to teach online, there's a couple of areas which I think, of expertise and knowledge, which I think teachers need to become aware of in order to shift their teaching from the physical classroom and into the virtual classroom. And these here are the 6 areas that I think need to be covered. And the first one is environmental, and that's about understanding the kind of impact of the physical environment that they're working in while they're teaching online. We think of online teaching as just being something that happens virtually online, but there is a physical environment too. There's my environment that's all around me here, from outside the window and from inside the room. And those kinds of things can impact on the way we teach and on the effectiveness of our teaching as well. So if you click the little icon there, you'll see what kind of things I'm referring to, and I'll go into these in more detail. These are the kind of things that you need to be aware of. The lighting in your room, is the room quiet, the positioning of the camera, sort of background and distractions and things like that. So understanding the impact of your physical environment is important. And of course, there's the technological aspects, of understanding the platform that you're working with and what its potential is and what its limitations are and the things that you need to do to make it work effectively. We need training in these kinds of things, how to use headphones, how to use a microphone. Often I found that teachers weren't using headphones or a microphone, and they were just using loudspeakers on their laptop or their computer, and that was causing a lot of problems for the students trying to listen, a lot of echo and a lot of lag. So they need to understand things like that, how to screen share, how to troubleshoot, how to set up breakout rooms, create QR codes. These kinds of things, the technical background knowledge that teachers need to acquire. And one of the main things that I'll be dealing with in this talk is the interpersonal aspects, because how we communicate with students and how we relate to them and build relationships with them is very different in this kind of environment to the physical environment. And these are some of the areas that I think teachers need training in, and that are important to make them as effective as teachers. Things like how to relate to the camera and project your personality through a camera like this in this kind of environment, use of body language and things like that. And I'll be going into those in more detail here. There are, of course, different pedagogical aspects that teachers need to be aware of. How do they create engagement between students, and the development of materials and how their materials impact on students' learning within this kind of environment. I think it's very important for teachers to develop an understanding of instructional design, because especially if they're having to build blended learning or build their own materials for this kind of environment, that becomes very important. And it's not often something that's neglected in our teacher training, especially when we're thinking of instructional design for the online classroom. Understanding your own behavior and how students' behavior affects each other can be very important as well. One thing I think that we often forget about in this kind of environment is a code of conduct. Not just a code of conduct for teachers, but also a code of conduct for students as well, so that students know what is and is not acceptable. Often students feel worried about other students taking pictures of them while they're in a virtual classroom. They're reluctant to turn on their video because they feel insecure about it. These kind of things, and having a code of conduct so students know that they're being monitored and how to keep safe is very important. And of course, for teachers, things like abiding by copyright law, how to manage their time effectively as well, so that they don't end up teaching 24/7. It's very important once you become accessible online. And I guess the last of my 6 elements is sort of motivational, and understanding how motivation is impacted by teaching online. I'm sure those of you that are doing it already must feel that your motivation for teaching when you're working from home is very different, and so as it is for our students, when they're stuck at home the whole time, the motivational curve becomes very different. And so we need to understand how to create socialization for our students, and create student projects, and develop things like student learning roadmaps and learning goals for students that they can tick off as they work online as well. So these for me are some of the 6 key areas of teacher training that I think teachers need to be aware of if they're going to work effectively within this kind of environment. Something that runs alongside of that, of course, as well, is learner training. And that's something that probably a lot of people didn't have a chance to address. A lot of us were dropped into teaching remotely very quickly and at very short notice, and didn't have a chance to prepare our students. But if you click on the little red button here, there's an article that I wrote about actually preparing students for this kind of environment, because that's very important. If we want our students to be successful online learners, then we need to prepare them for it, and we need to deal with a certain amount of learner training before they come into this kind of environment, to ensure that when they get here, it's a success. And that can help our teachers as well. If you're a teacher and you're suddenly dropped into this kind of remote environment with lots of different students who don't know what they're doing and don't understand the platform, don't know how to use their headphones and microphone, then it's likely that the result is going to be chaos. And teachers shouldn't really have to deal with that. You know, it should be something that we prepare our students for before they get into the classroom. And again, this is something that I found very important when I was working as the head of learning for our online school. We found that, you know, in the environment that we were working in was very commercial, so students signed up for a subscription, and if they didn't like what they were getting, they could easily drop the subscription. And we found that, you know, by delivering effective learner training and getting students onboarded and into the classroom very smoothly, and so that they were prepared for their first lesson, really helped us to reduce the amount of students who dropped out. You know, it had a huge impact on reducing the number of students that dropped out by about 60%. So, you know, learner training in preparation before they go into the virtual classroom, I think, is very important for students too. I'll move on to sort of the interpersonal side of things, and I think, you know, one of the most important things that I think in terms of the teacher behaviour and what makes a good teacher is in this kind of environment is how they're able to develop a rapport with their students and build good rapport with the students. And that's something that we found incredibly important in retaining students and making sure that they kept coming to classes. There's a little questionnaire here, so if you have your mobile phone handy and it has a QR code scanner on it, you could scan the QR code here, and if you scan the QR code, you'll see there's a little questionnaire that looks a bit like this, and it says good rapport is. So could you type in your answer, the rest of that sentence? Good rapport is. So let's see what we all think good rapport is. So I'll pass the link to that to you through the chat. So you can either scan the QR code, or if you go to chat, you should see it appearing in the chat room. So you should be able to click on that room in chat and open it, open the link and finish that sentence. Okay, so the link is in the chat, or you could you can scan it with your QR code scanner. Okay, I think all panelists privately. Okay, I'll put it into chat again. It should be coming through now. Okay. Okay, can you see the link now? If you can, please click on it, open it, and my chat keeps reverting back to all panelists. Okay, I've just put it in again, all panelists and attendees. Somebody's got it, yeah. Okay, so you can either use the link or scan that with your QR code scanner. And then if we look here, we should start to see people's answers emerging. Yeah, as you can see, they're now coming through. Great, good. So rapport is trust and comfort, being comfortable with each other. Okay, so nice, that's a nice collection of things. Body language is coming out as very important. Having a frank relationship with students. Having a level of ease, good, yeah. So all these things are involved in developing good rapport. Great, good. Mutual trust, knowing students, making students engaged. Yeah, those kinds of things. So, you know, those kinds of the kinds of things that we're used to building with our students in the physical classroom, but can become very difficult in this kind of classroom when we're having to handle things like, you know, how to use the technology and how to do various things. So here's a picture of a teacher that you should be able to see on the screen. So, you know, how good do you think he is at building rapport? When you look at this picture, you see the position that he's in, you know, his You know, is he the kind of teacher that you're going to want to engage with and build good rapport with? And for me, the answer is probably no. You know, I'd like to think that if I slide this across, that this guy is a lot more likely to be able to build good rapport with students. I mean, he could do with smiling a bit more, that would really help. But, you know, essentially, you know, having this kind of appearance on the screen and students seeing this is certainly much better than seeing this. When you're too close to the screen, you have your head down, and you know, you can't use your body language, you can't use gesture, you can't use your facial expression, there's no eye contact, and that makes it very, very difficult to build rapport with your students. So, you know, getting this, you know, your appearance within the camera and the space worked on initially is very, very important to you, into building rapport. And that starts by working with the environment and how you set up your room. So I think, you know, setting up your room is very important. You know, I know most of us probably don't have a lot of choice about where we're working. You know, we've been forced to work from home, but trying to find a space within your home that's, you know, quiet, reasonably private, so you're not being interrupted, that you have fresh air, so you're staying cool and fresh. There aren't any distractions in terms of noise or outside of a window or something like that. And there isn't, you know, lots of background noise. So, you know, those kind of things are very important, I think, you know, making sure you get the room right and the space right, you know, so that you can teach your students without being distracted and without them being distracted, and so that they can hear you properly. In terms of the background, you know, and the background, by this I mean the background and what's behind you here, I think that's also very important too. You know, try to avoid having, you know, lots of, I mean, I know some people like to have their bookshelves behind them, but I try to avoid that, because when I'm watching people, I find I'm looking towards their books, trying to read what books they have on their shelves, or what ornaments, or what photos. You know, keep the back, what's behind you, plain and distraction free. You know, and I think, you know, wear clothes that contrast with your background as well. You know, I wear a dark jacket and I have a light wall behind me, and those kind of things help to make you stand out and make you a bit more clearer when you're using your gestures and your hands and things like that. So, you know, you're not difficult to see. You've got a very plain background, and people aren't losing what the kind of visual effect and the visual impact of what you're seeing. You know, for me, I think that's very important. Difficult to do depending on where you live, but, you know, see if you can sort something out, even if it's sort of putting a sheet behind something. I actually once saw a presentation by someone who had a really dark background and was wearing a dark jacket and a dark shirt, and it looked like they were kind of floating head, which became very distracting too. So, you know, try and avoid that kind of thing. The next thing, of course, is to try and get your lighting right as well. You want to make sure that students can see you clearly. And I think, you know, having the right lighting can really help with that. You know, if you have the light behind you, then you'll look like a silhouette. It would be great to have what's in the top left-hand corner, which is, you know, a lighting rig that sort of puts diffused light on your face, but, you know, not many of us have that. You know, try to avoid having a light directly pointing at your face. I mean, in some ways that's an easy solution, but the problem with that is that you're probably going to end up with a headache and you'll get lots of reflections. So try to sort of avoid that. What it's good to be able to do is just, you know, if you have a simple desk lamp like the one in the bottom right picture, you know, have that on and point it to the wall that's to one side of you, and try and bounce the light off the wall so the light reflects onto your face. That's what I have at the moment. I have just one desk lamp. It's pointing at the wall beside me. I have some tinfoil on the wall that reflects light here. So it gives me a reasonable amount of light so that you can see me and I'm not silhouetted, and, you know, you can pick up on facial expressions and hand gestures like that, okay? You know, so think about your light. Don't have it too strong, but, you know, try to bounce it off something, but make sure that your students can see you clearly. And again, these are things that we also need to teach our students to do, because they need to be able to see each other clearly if we're going to have a good rapport in the classroom, and they're going to have to work together at all. The next, and probably I think one of the most important things, is the webcam and how you set up your webcam. I think it's very important that you have the camera that you're looking at on the same level as your eyes. Have it on eye level, so you're looking directly at the camera, not that you're looking down at your screen. One of the things that I do as well with this is to sort of the little zoom image where you can see yourself on the video. I drag it up to the top of the screen and put it underneath the camera, so that reminds me of where it is. But having that camera eye level and having the screen parallel to your body can really help. I'm guessing that if a lot of you use laptops, what happens is it looks something like this. Is that correct? So you have the laptop that's flat on your desk, you have the screen tilting back, and the camera is looking up at you. And that gives a kind of distorted effect of your body. It also cuts off rather a lot of your body. And what you'll find is if you're using your laptop like that, you'll just find the top head and shoulders are appearing on the screen. And that makes it very difficult to sort of work with body language and gesture, and for your students to work with you. It also distorts your head and your body as well, so they look out of proportion. And in some cases we find that the camera's pointing up your nose, and that's not very flattering. So if you're working with the laptop and you want to do it, set your laptop up in a better way, try to have something like this that's underneath it, which is a laptop riser, and it's just a simple slope that you put your laptop on so that the keyboard is sloping and the screen opens so that it's flat and parallel with your body. And this will make much more of you visible to the camera, and will stop that kind of distortion and make sure that the camera isn't pointing at the roof. So, that way it's much more easy for you to be seen. So thinking about things like that is very important. And of course, thinking about eye contact. Make sure when you're talking to your students, or you're delivering a presentation, or you're teaching in class, try to look at the camera at the top, rather than looking at the screen or looking down at notes. This will help you make eye contact with your students. Now, eye contact is very important to our body language and as a means of communication, and it tells you a lot about attitude. So really, students need to be able to make eye contact with you. This is a bit more difficult if you have glasses in this kind of environment as well, because it's very difficult to pick up without getting reflections. But if I take them off, I can't really see you. So, that's something I have to work with. But, work with the camera, look at the camera, not the screen, and, try to make eye contact. Don't be reading your notes or anything like that. And of course, for me, one of the most important things is space and distance from the camera. Think about how close you are and how far back you can go, and you can actually work with that. I teach standing up, so I have my laptop very high up on a high up desk so that I can teach standing up. And this enables me to move backwards and forwards from the camera and use that as a way of managing the class. Back here against the wall, I've got all these kind of gestures and and body language. I can say, yesterday, and use those kind of things. I can put syllables on my fingers and those kinds of things as well. So, I can do all my pronunciation work and syntax work by putting words on my fingers. I can show things, I'm far enough back to actually show things to the students, and hey, look at this, that's a picture of my family or something like that. But I can also move forward when I want to. If I see a student who's not behaving very well, I can sort of move into the screen and wag my finger at them and say, hey, you're not listening, or something like that. So, think about how you work with the distance from the screen, and getting further away from it during different parts, maybe coming forward when you're giving instructions and you want students to listen, and being strict even closer when you want them to behave. So there are lots of ways you can work with proximity from the screen, especially if you're standing up. If you can't stand up, maybe a chair with wheels on can help, but try and work with that proximity. I think that's very important. And I think it's important to work on your body language and make sure your body language is seen. You can move in closer for the facial expressions, use your hands, work with the space. As teachers, we're used to having a very large space in the classroom. We can walk up and down the whole length of the class, go to the back of the class, to the front of the class. But here we're restricted to this kind of space here that we have on the camera. But we can still work with that. You can still do things with it in terms of, okay, if you want to step out, you can say to students, okay, you do the pair work now, I'll just step out of the screen. Step back when you want to get their attention again. Think about how you use this screen shape, how you use your body language within it. You can do mime and things, games with mime if you're working far enough away from the camera. I have a game that I always played in the physical classroom with my students called the magic object, and it works a little bit like this. And you sort of show your students your hands, and you say that in my hands I have something very special. What do you think I have in my hands? You can try this now and try and guess what it is that I have in my hands. Type it into the chat. What do you think I have here in my hand? Would you like to see what I have in my hand? What do you think it is? Okay, I'll show you what it is. Here it is. It's a magic object. You see, this is a magic object. And this magic object can become anything. It can become anything that you want it to. Okay, I'm going to make it into something now, and I want you to guess what I'm making it into. Okay? What do you think it is now? Yeah, it's a cat. That's right. Okay, what do you think it is now? That's right, it's a cup. Okay, good, great. Now I'm going to see who got that right, and I'm going to pass the magic object to my student and then get them to make it into something. So here's a way that you can get your students working with the camera as well. And be sure to pass it to them through the camera. Okay, take the magic object and make it into something. Okay, so I've passed it to you through the camera, and now you can work with it. And playing these kinds of games with mime can help students, understand that, the camera is there watching them. It's a way of communicating, and we can sort of make them feel more comfortable and build some rapport with the camera, and maybe get them away from the self-consciousness that a lot of students feel with the camera. So just trying to play different mime games of different kinds, showing them pictures, things like that can really help, I think, and help develop your relationship with them and the way they work with the camera. Sound, of course, is very important too, and understanding how your sound works on the computer and being able to help students with their sound. I think it's very important to use a headset. I have a little earpiece with microphones there. But if you're using a headset, you're going to get much better sound for your students, and your students need to use a headset too to avoid feedback, echo loops, and sort of bad sound quality for everyone. Try to avoid using a microphone that's built into your laptop as well, because that can pick up background noise from the fan on your laptop if it gets hot. So know how to adjust the sound, know how to balance it, help students with it, but most importantly, use a headset with earphones and a microphone on. Otherwise, you're going to be picking up loads of background noise for your students, and the sound quality is going to be really bad. So I think that's something that's really important. One of the other really important things is thinking about how you use your voice. A lot of us, if we teach in large classrooms, or we're used to giving conference presentations with a large audience, we tend to project our voices a lot, and that can become very difficult to listen to for students if you're doing it within this kind of classroom. I remember that my my father, when I was a child, whenever he made a phone call, we used to joke that he didn't really need the phone because he shouted so loudly whenever he was on the phone that, you know, we joked that wherever you were in the world, you could probably hear him. But I think, you know, that makes it very difficult to listen to if you're using your outdoor voice, you know, in this kind of environment. You need to take the volume down a bit and talk more like you're speaking with more naturally with someone who's a friend. You know, otherwise it becomes very difficult to listen to. If everything they're saying is trying to project to the back of the room, that becomes very difficult for students to listen to for over an hour. You know, so you have to take the volume down, you know, and not too much. But again, it's something that you can play with and think about, you know, how you use your voice for different parts of your lesson. You know, you can use your voice differently when you're giving instructions, you know, so you come forward towards the camera and say, hey, now listen to me. You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Move backwards when you're having more casual conversation with your students. Or if you need their attention, hey, listen to me, you know. So think about how you use your voice, how you use it in relation to the proximity for the camera as well, how that affects the change of pace in your classroom. Okay. So those are things to do with this kind of interpersonal things in terms of the way you work with students, but we also have to think about how students work with each other. You know, if we want students to be comfortable working with each other and you know, to feel that they can use the camera and communicate through the camera, then we need to sort of build students into some kind of team that's happy to work together. I've got another quick one of these questionnaires for you now as well. And so the question is, what makes a group of people into a team? And I'll pass the link through the chat for you. It should look something like this. Okay, I think that's gone to everyone. The link should be appearing in your chat very soon. So what makes a group of people into a team? See if you can answer that question just briefly and then click on submit when you're ready. If you have a mobile phone with a QR code scanner, you can scan the code to the left and do that on your mobile phone. Okay, and as you can see, we've got some answers coming through already. That's great. Yeah, great, good. Compatibility, unity of understanding, like-minded. Yeah. We may not have any choice about whether they're like-minded people. Would be nice to have that. I think one element of you know, building your students into a team as opposed to a group is thinking about the way that you can communicate with them and the way they communicate. And for an example, you know, a group, this is what a common class with a group of people and a teacher looks like. You've got the teacher at the middle and the teacher is communicating out to the students. And that's a group, that's not a team. In order to become a team, of course, you know, teachers need to communicate with the students, students need to communicate with the teacher, but students also need to be able to communicate with each other, and that involves, you know, getting students into groups, getting them into breakout rooms, getting them working together on projects and those kinds of things. But before we need to do that, we need to understand what the difference is between groups and teams, and you know, how that's going to impact on our classroom dynamics. And here there are some of the main differences that I've put down for you. I won't go through this in detail, you can look at it later if you want to, but sort of some of the main things came out already in the questionnaire that you submitted. You know, goal orientation, you know, a group of people or individuals working towards their own goal. You know, if you want to build students as a team, they need to have a collective goal that they work on together that fulfills their individual needs as well. But they need to be working together towards their goal. They need to be collaborating together and welcoming the chance to collaborate together on their shared objectives. You know, They need to welcome contrasting views. Individuals working as a group feel threatened if someone has a different opinion of them. But if students are working as a team, they'll welcome differences of opinion, because variety and diversity of opinion helps them achieve their goals. Where students working individually in groups, may feel a sense of competitiveness with each other, whereas a team is working together. They either all win together or they all lose together. So it's important to build that, the sort of decision making and getting them involved in those kinds of things. So that can really help with your dynamics if your students are working as a team. In terms of building students as a team, I think it's important to that you work on that and you give them activities, because they don't just simply become a team. To get started with, I think, getting to know you games and getting students to know more about each other is very important if you want them to work as a team. And again, there are some examples of activities that you could try, especially these are activities for getting to know each other that should work in this kind of remote classroom. Excuse me. So, a photo of your life, we've got a camera here, so you can get students to show each other pictures. I've got a picture here that I can show you so you find out a little bit more about me. That's a picture of my wife when we first met. We're in a cafe in Morocco and she's drinking mint tea. So that's, to get students to show pictures and use the camera to show pictures of their life and talk about them a bit together. That's a great way of them getting to know each other. It could be a peek into their homes. You could get them to use the camera to show the rest of the room that they're working in, or show them around the house, putting them in groups to do that and talk. They'll give them a guided tour of their house. Personal facts or guessing game. If you collect a whole bunch of personal facts about your students and then put them into a questionnaire and share them with the students, and they have to guess which student each fact relates to. So that's a nice way of getting students to think about and find out new things about each other. There's a nice activity at the bottom here, which is a new one for me, which is called The Aliens Have Landed. And in that activity, you put students into a group and they work together and you tell them that the aliens from another planet have landed on Earth. They can't speak any English, but they want to learn about our culture and our planet. So your students have to think about 5 images or icons that they would show to the aliens to communicate what's important about our planet to them. And I think this is a very good exercise because it gets students thinking about what their values are and comparing values and what's important, what they believe is important together collectively. And that can help them get to know each other a lot better and build them as a team. So there's a few team building activities. If you want teams, it's good to have a team name. Put the team together and give them a team name. It's also a good idea, I think, to create roles for the team. And students can decide for themselves who in each team has the role, but you could sort of get them to decide who would be the team leader. Get them to choose their own name for the team. Get them to decide who will be the vocabulary expert, who will be the grammar expert, who will be the timekeeper, who will be the person who makes sure everybody's involved. So think of a list of important kind of team roles and get the teams, put your students in groups and make them a team. Get them to decide who has each role within their team. There's also sort of team building activities that you can do with students. This is one that I like quite a lot, and this is a team building activity where you tell your team of students that they're on a deserted island together, and they've been shipwrecked there, and they have to survive together. And they have to think about what 8 things they would take with them to the desert island that would help them survive. And then they have to decide what roles would they have within the island. Who would be the person who cooks the food? Who would be the leader? Who would be the person who grows the food? Who would be the person who looks for shelter and develops, their shelter? And then at the end of that, there's a kind of reflection task about how well they work together as a team. because students really need to think about and be aware of their roles within the teams and how they're adding to the team. And of course, this ability to teamwork and work as a team is a very important skill for their future life as well. So this isn't just about building rapport in the classroom anymore. It's also about helping them to develop them and make them employable in the future. At the bottom here, if you click on this interactive button, once you get the presentation, there's a link to 55 different virtual team building activities. So by all means, have a look through here and see if you can find some that you think are more suited for your class. There's lots of them there. They've been developed to help people who work in business teams work as a team, but you can adapt them and help your students use those as well. So think about the team building activities, and of course things like project-based learning as well can really help students work together as a team, because that is an important aspect of project-based learning as well. One of the other things that I think is really important in this environment is that you allow some time for socialization. Whether we like to admit it or not, one of the reasons our students come to school, why they come to class, why they come to English classes, why they're studying in university, one of the things that they really like about it is meeting each other, and having time to socialize together. That's where they make friends. That's where they build relationships. And I think we have to, build some time for that within our remote classroom as well. So maybe giving them 10 minutes where they can just go into a breakout room together and chat. Or even if it's as a whole class like this, you can just step out of the frame. Give them some time to sort of work together and sort of socialize together, a few minutes to find out how each other are, compare notes about what their lockdown experience is. Having that socialization and time to socialize is a really important part of learning. It's really important part of building relationships for your future. And I think if we're neglecting that, while we're teaching online, and that's very important. That's a serious sort of piece of negligence, I guess, there. We can also help with this by sort of putting our students in groups or teams to play games. And these are some nice kind of online games, online sites that help you manage the game online virtually. This is one of my favorites. There's 3 here. This one has 4 different games. And the first game is Would You Rather? And so it gives students a choice of questions. Would you rather do this thing or that thing? And they can discuss them together and have fun talking about them in class. There's another game called Spot the Lie. And so students each get a question and they have to give 3 different answers to it. And one of those answers has to be a lie. And then they discuss them together. They have a time limit. And at the end of the time limit, they have to decide which one was the lie. So, what are your greatest fears? My 3 greatest fears are spiders, high places, and water. And you students discuss it together and try and ask questions and try and find out which is the true one and which were the true ones, which is the lie. There's also a common game that we play called Describe It. So students have an example of a word and they have to describe it without using the word. Or there's a question of the day. For example, a book that had a significant impact on you. So there's a set question that they can discuss. And again, that's a good way to get students playing, finding out more about each other. When you're ready to play the game, you just decide, you click on start the game, you decide on your time limit. We want to play for 3.5 minutes. We want 2 questions per player. Then I type in my name, Nick, as I'm the teacher, and it says create room, create game. And once that's created, I just copy this link here and I share it with my students through the chat window, and they can join in the game and play together. That helps us manage the game much more effectively. It decides who's going to be the questioner, who's going to be the answer, and put students in groups. So these kind of online games that students can play can really help sort of building the rapport, having some social time as well. There's one here which is quizzes, which students do in groups of 4. they work through it, choose a quiz and work through it together. Another one called Fishbowl, which has sort of different kinds of games that includes things like charades, miming. So, you know, that's another great way to get students using the camera. So if you can, once you download the presentation, you can get links to all these different online games that they can play in the remote classroom. The last thing I'll deal with is student motivation. And, you know, this is probably something that you've experienced going up and down over the course of this, you know, the last few months when you've been kind of working remotely. You know, there are reports that a lot of students were very enthusiastic about having lessons in Zoom and lessons online, lessons from home when it started, and then after a while their motivation started to go right down. It's been months since they've seen their friends, and you know, often it's that motivation can be a very difficult thing to cope with in this kind of environment, you know, especially if students are giving up and stop turning up, you know. And so I think motivation and empathizing with our students and understanding their situation can help us a lot. You know, often teachers kind of, I'm just going to close the window because it's getting noisy. Often teachers take a lot of the responsibility for motivating their students, and we don't think about what other things might be impacting their lives. You know, motivation isn't just about the way we teach and the things that we're doing. You know, we have to be understanding about other things that are going on in our lives. You know, there's a few kind of empathy questions that you can think about in relation to your students down here. You know, what's a bad day like for them? What are they afraid of? You know, what things keep them awake at night? You know, think about, you know, what are your students' pains and gains in their day-to-day lives? And also on the left here, there's a little diagram of something called an empathy map. And this is maybe something you can do as teachers together and collectively think about your students. So you work around the empathy map in a clockwise direction, starting from who. So start thinking about, you know, who is it you want to empathize with, and you write information about them in this part of the map. And then the next thing, number 2, you start thinking about what do they need to do, what do they need to achieve, you know, and you make notes about that kind of thing here. So that you could use, for example, one student or sort of a persona of your students collectively. Then thinks about what kind of things are they seeing, what's going on around them that they see that influences the way they feel about, you know, learning English, for example. What kind of things do they say that show how they feel about English, you know, and what kinds of things do they do? What's their behaviour that indicates that they're having a problem or that they're doing well, or what kind of things are they doing in relation to the lessons? And what kind of things are they hearing? What things are going on around them? And lastly, thinking about what they feel, what they think, what are they thinking about? What are they feeling at the moment? And just try and make a list of their pains and gains. You know, okay, probably they're feeling isolated, you know, they're at home, they're missing their friends. They may be worried about what's happening with the virus. They could have family who have caught the virus, or someone in their building who has the virus. You know, think about these things and try to sort of analyze students, you know, feelings and needs. There's a link here to sort of a more in-depth article about empathy mapping. So once you get the presentation, if you click and read through this, it kind of tells you a little bit more about it and how to do it. So if you want to sort of, you know, really understand your students a bit better and sort of do an empathy map about them, then, you know, that's a great tool to sort of understand what's going on with them and try to understand their motivation. Okay, I'm running out of time now, and I want to leave 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like me to try and answer, you can either scan the QR code here, or I'll pass a link to it through the chat. Okay, this should go to all of you. There should be a link in chat. So if you want to submit a question, just click Ask a Question, type your question in here, and then click Submit. Okay, and you should be able to add a question. And I should be able to see them appearing here. So we'll all be able to see the questions, and we'll all be discuss the answers. have a quick discussion of the answers. So I'll give you a couple of, I'll step out of the screen for a minute, give you a couple of minutes to think about questions and what you'd like to ask, and then I'll try to kind of deal with them. Okay, so the first question is here already, and it's how to create rapport without access of a camera. And I think that's really difficult, but I think if you have to do that, you have to think much more carefully about, how you work with your voice, how you're using your voice, whether you're sounding friendly, whether you're sounding supportive. Your voice becomes that much more important if your students can't see you. The next question is how to create rooms for team activities online. That very much depends on the platform that you're using. Hopefully you are using a platform where you can put students into groups. I think with things like Zoom, there's a breakout rooms feature where you can put students into groups, or with Microsoft Teams. Most platforms have some kind of group work facility or something like that. If you haven't got anything like that, you can just let me you can get a free breakout room from this site here. It allows you to create a free room. I'll put the link to that into the chat. And you can create free rooms for up to 4 students there. So if you want to give students a room to work in together, just create 3 or 4 different rooms or 10 different rooms and get your students to work together in those rooms. As long as they share a link with you, you can go around and find out what they're doing. But monitoring breakout rooms is quite a big problem. But could you share some tips for asynchronous online teaching? Oh, that's a very big question. I think, perhaps one of the most important things to understand about asynchronous online teaching is that, you need to, whatever you give your students to do in terms of working independently, they need to somehow get some feedback on that work. Computers are very good at giving feedback on tests, whether the answer is right or wrong, but that's about the limit of what they can do, I think. Your asynchronous teaching might be more effective if you're putting students together to work in teams asynchronously by using maybe chat forums, giving students something to activities to do or projects to do together, or giving students things to listen to, write about, and then sort of submit homework to you about. Those things can be much more effective than, just working through activities on the computer. If students aren't getting feedback, though, they very soon become, discouraged about doing work online. Another question, students are not forthcoming in the online classes, probably because the lockdown is really bad. How can one break them in RTT without appearing patronizing or boring? Well, I hope, some of the suggestions that we've had here in terms of, giving them some socialization time, building them into teams, giving them games to do, can help do some of those things, and that doesn't have to be patronizing or boring, getting them to work together on things. How can we do a writing activity? Writing activities aren't so difficult. There is, maybe I can just, if I can find some, I'll find a tool for you that they can do collaborative writing with. I manage a site here, which you're probably seeing now, which has all kinds of different tools that you can use to help support your technology-based teaching. And within here, there are lots of different tools that you can use. I'll just find the one that I'm looking for. I think it's on page 2. Yeah, there it is. So there's something called CryptPad, which looks like this, and you can get your students to write on a document collaboratively. They choose this one, rich text. It opens a document for them, just taking a little bit of time. And if you share the link here to the document with them, both students can log into the platform, and they can work on the text together, or they can just work on it alone and then share the link with you once they're finished, just by clicking share. Then you can see it and edit it. Something like Google Docs also works well for this kind of thing as well. But that's a kind of, I'll just click back to that. That's a way of getting students to do writing work online and then sort of share it with you. You can also get them creating PowerPoint presentations. I'll put the link to that into the chat if you want to check it out later. And I'll also give you the link to this site here, which has lots of different web-based tools in which you can kind of explore. Okay, I'll just get back to the, so that's sort of dealing with writing. Any activities to motivate the passive learners? Again, quite difficult, but some of the games that we've tried, are not necessary. One thing I think is not necessarily to believe that being a passive learner is a good thing. If they're learners, that's great. If they're passive and not learning, then that's a problem. Often students aren't so comfortable participating in this kind of environment. It's interesting actually a lot of the reports I've had, teachers have been saying that students who were very active in the physical classroom, a lot of them are less comfortable in this kind of classroom, whereas students who were uncomfortable in the physical classroom, some of them are more comfortable and have more to say and more to contribute into this kind of classroom. But as long as they're learning, I don't think we have to insist that they're active, but give them time and give them time to get used to the environment, I think. Tips on asynchronous teaching done already. Am I going backwards now? I need to go this way, don't I? 1, 2. No, what's happening? Marcus answers. How to control class in remote teaching. I think controlling the class can be actually easier with remote teaching. You have the potential to sort of mute your students or turn off their video. So if you understand the tools that you're using here, actually classroom management can become a lot more automated and a lot easier. So I think the answer to that is make sure you really understand the tools of the platform that you're using. Literature, I'm afraid that's probably too big a question to deal with here. That's another presentation. Correct written assignments submitted by students. Yeah, I think the tool that I just put into their CryptoPad, if they use that or something like Google Documents, if they use Google Docs to do their writing, they submit it to you and give you a link to it. You can write comments on that or video comments and share it with them. Sorry, answered. Mixed ability classroom. Mixed ability classes can be a problem in this kind of environment, but if you're getting your students into teams, then that's something that can help with that. Make the strongest person the team leader, make them responsible for ensuring that everybody else learns and checking their learning as well. That can help a bit. Free websites for interactive games. I think I put some in the presentation. Greatest personal attribute of an online teacher, I think, is personality, being able to project your personality through the camera. When we were looking for potential teachers to work with in the school that I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things that we looked for was their ability to sort of be really friendly and welcoming in this kind of environment. Teachers who had their eyes down, looking like that, not really projecting at all, those weren't the people who were able to engage students. My favorite guitar, I'll tell you about that another time. Good, great, I've done speaking. How can teacher motivate the students in a virtual classroom? Again, teamwork, project work, socialization, virtual class. This is very difficult. I think, probably one of the most difficult things, working in this environment is to actually get around and see what your students are doing. Even if you put them into breakout rooms, if you've got a large class, actually going into each breakout room and, trying to find out what they're doing becomes very difficult. So it's very important that you kind of deal with that if you can. Again, getting students into teams can help you deal with that, because you can make a student responsible as a monitor. Get one of the strong students to monitor the other students when they're working in breakout rooms, and to help you give them some feedback. I actually have another session on that one. Can empathy be misunderstood as getting personal with students? I don't think so. Empathy is something very specific. It's about understanding how your students feel. And that isn't, I don't think you can misunderstand how your students feel, but I think, it's important that we empathize with them and understand how they feel. Spoken activities, yes, but you need to get your students into breakout. Okay. How do we ensure balanced participation by students? Tech-savvy students might hold the teacher's attention. Again, I think learner training can help with this. If all of the students are trained, and understand how they need to work, how to work together, then that shouldn't be that much of a problem. Cybersecurity for learners and teachers, yes, it's something that they need to be educated in, but that's quite a long question to answer. And it should be part of your code of conduct. Enthusiastic throughout the class. Again, I think, keeping students enthusiastic, break up the class, have different sections where they do different things, give them a socialization break in the middle if that's necessary, and that can help. Again, same thing. How can a teacher punish a student? I don't think you should ever punish students. Try to understand what their problems are and deal with them. In real class, ideally, the teacher should speak 20% of the class time. Is it possible here? It is possible here if we use the breakout rooms, we set up tasks and get our students working in the breakout rooms together. But that depends a lot on the size of your class. Convince students to work hard. Hard to judge how much the students have understood. It is hard to judge how much students have understood, and it's always hard to judge how much students have understood, regardless of, I think, which kind of classroom you're working in. In a way, that's one of the reasons why we do, testing and evaluative testing. I think one great thing to do is, if you've got students working in this kind of environment, is get them to kind of keep a portfolio, a digital portfolio, and that can sort of record so that they have things to add into it, like speaking activities and written work, and so they can see and judge their own progress within that. Emotional intelligence, empathy in remote classroom. The answer to this one, I think, is in the empathy map. So read that and see how you feel about that. Tips to maintain student teaching. Again, teamwork. Same question. Too big a question, I'm sorry. How to catch students' attention during online classes. Use the space, use the space, come closer, use your voice. What about Google Classroom platform? I'm not a big fan of the Google Classroom platform, and it's better for asynchronous teaching than live teaching. Which apps do you use to create PowerPoint? This presentation here was used creating an online app called Genially, which is free. And you'll see where that is when I share the presentation with you. Is it that the teacher has to transfer? I think it's just a way of adjusting the way you teach. You have to adjust to this environment. You don't have to transform yourself totally. You have to learn some new skills. You have to learn to work in a new environment. As a teacher, it's good to learn new things. Yeah, okay, feedback link, how to motivate the students. Okay. How can live discussions be conducted online? Live discussions has to be breakout rooms. You've got to get to know and use those breakout rooms. Okay, it's the last one. So what I'll do is I'll share the link to the presentation in the chat now. So there it is, it's coming through. If you click on that, you can read the whole of the presentation. You can also, if you have a QR code reader, you can scan the QR code here and get the presentation onto your mobile device. And here at the end, if you check this out later, there's also a free book called Digital Tools for Teachers. So if you click on here when you get it, there's a link here to the book. It's actually not a free book, it's a paid for book, but if you use this code here, this coupon code, so click on buy now, enter your email details, use this coupon code, it will reduce the price to 0 and you can download it for free. So please do, have a look in that. It has a lot more digital tools and things that you can use. And the last thing to say is thank you for listening. Sorry I had to rush through the questions, but I'm running out of time, and hope the presentation is useful and that you can sort of look through it and pick up all these links and activities and ideas. I've just put it into the chat once more for you. I'll also sort of leave the QR code there if you can scan it, and I'll send it to the organisers so that they can share that with you if you want. So thank you very much for listening. Sorry it's been a bit of a rush, and I hope you enjoy your remote teaching, and that some of the ideas and some of the things I've shared with you are successful for you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. After your presentation, I could just feel that change is the end result of true learning. And if you are not dynamic in the following change, you are dead. The language classroom is becoming an increasingly complex variety of digital devices. And these devices can become a tiresome distraction or a powerful tool for learning. And that depends on the skill and knowledge used by the teacher. And truly, sir, your session proved to be a very informative and, in fact, a boon for teachers who are teaching online. So thank you once again from all the team for your valuable time and constant support to make this workshop a success.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Keep in touch, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I again thank all the participants for being active throughout the session. And again, sir, thank you very much for this enlightening session. I hope this session would definitely add some value when the teachers will teach online next time. So all the very best to the teacher community. And to this note, I will end the session, and again, we'll see you on our ELT Summit. Thank you very much, all of you.